So I'm super excited to introduce our speakers. First up, we have Elana Berkowitz, who is a founding partner of Springbank Collective, which invests in early stage companies building the infrastructure to enable working women and families to thrive across career, care, and household consumers. She's also on the steering committee for Power to the Polls, which registered 700,000 plus young Americans to serve as poll workers in 2020. Joining her in conversation is Jana Meyerowitz-Turner, who is the president of Style House, a mission-driven strategic communications and business development consultancy. She also serves on the board of A Call to Men, a violence prevention organization working to create a world where all men and boys are loving and respectful, and all women, girls, and those at the margins of society are valued and safe. So welcome to both of you. I will turn the stage over to you.
Hello, hello.
Hi.
Hi, really good to be with you all here. Nice to see you, Elana. Excuse me, I got some frogginess today. Well, let's kick it off because this community always has really great questions, and I want to make sure that we leave a lot of room for them. But Meg did a great job of introducing us. I mean, Elana, you've had, even at such a young age, an illustrious career that crosses the public, private, and social sector in a way that is just so pertinent to this and every conversation. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that thread and then the founding of Springbank Collective?
Sure. First of all, it's wonderful to be with everybody today, and also there's about to be an enormous thunderstorm here in New York, and there's people fixing my roof. So if you hear all sorts of weird sounds, apologies in advance. So for me, I'm a bit of a multi-sector athlete in my own career across, as Jana mentioned, the public sector, private sector, social sector, and to me, part of that is because the biggest, most interesting problems that we need to solve as a society and as a country just cannot be solved by one alone. I think we see that in all sorts of challenges, whether it's in healthcare and climate change, and increasingly in the care economy. And so throughout my career, I have tried to build big things at scale in different ways, and sometimes that means building progressive movements, whether it's for civic participation or youth progressive engagement, which was my first job at Center for American Progress, or whether it's working in the Obama administration and sort of on policies and programs that you hope can have really large impact. And then when it came to Springbank, it was interesting. I had I had my first child a couple of years ago. She is a very cool, small, dance party in a box. And it was very interesting as a woman who had worked in a lot of challenging environments, too often been, the only woman in a room, worked in 12 countries in 3 years, and kind of did all the things of all of a sudden seeing this yawning gap of what I think of as this sort of missing infrastructure for working women and working families. And that was part of how we came to Springbank. I've always been passionate about female founders, and I mean that both, as social entrepreneurs, for-profit entrepreneurs, everything in between. And I'm passionate about being a woman on a cap table. I am a woman on many cap tables and want to see many, many more women doing that. But to me, those are often symptoms, not causes, of this missing infrastructure for working women. And we see it in all sorts of ways, right? Here it is, however many decades, after we started talking about the wage gap that is obviously particularly profound for women of color, it has not shrunk very much at all. And obviously this year during the pandemic was one of the most brutal years for women's workforce participation. It's going to take us an unbelievably long time to dig ourselves out of. And so, when we thought about Springbank, so I'll tell you a little bit about sort of the sectors we focus on, and then the kind of community we've tried to build around it. And of course, we've been really lucky to have Jana as part of our community since day one. So, for us, there's 3 buckets. We think of it as career, care, and household consumer. And part of it, we see them all as really mutually reinforcing. Because, for instance, we can't solve, making work, more flexible and more inclusive when so many folks who are sandwich generation, who are caring for a young child, are caring for their aging parents, can't get the care they need. It doesn't matter how inclusive your workplace is, and sort of vice versa. So I think we see this as kind of this ecosystem. And so, for us, career is, investments in companies that make it easier to work flexibly, to upskill throughout your lives, to access benefits and economic opportunities if you are a sort of freelancer, solopreneur, kind of gig economy worker, which so many women are in that bucket. And then, of course, for care, it's childcare and it's elder care. It's also underserved areas of women's healthcare, as well as sort of other areas of healthcare focusing on lower and middle income communities that we think can really impact sort of real American families. And then of course, household consumer is, the things that make it faster, easier, cheaper, more environmentally friendly to be a working woman who often has, people who are expecting, meals to be served, who have financial, household financial services to do and things like that. And so we've done about 20 investments, mostly seed and A. And we're actually raising Fund 1 now. But so what's interesting is how part of the way we've done so many of these investments is via deal-by-deal SPVs with our amazing Springbank Collective community. And we now have around 100 members, and that includes large family offices, awesome angel operators, and they will invest with us sort of deal by deal once a investment passes our investment committee. And it's been, hugely valuable for our companies because frankly, some, the amazing women and also men who invest in our SPVs are bringing a ton of value for the companies we work with, everything from having kind of a major company CFO helping a tiny company figure out how to hire their first finance hire, to a former, top newspaper editor editing the press release of a seed stage company and kind of everything in between. So that's kind of the collective we've tried to bring and build, and we hope to continue building because frankly, these categories around sort of women, workplace, care are only growing more and more every day. And, just one last note on that in terms of some of the macros, first of all, even in a sort of recessionary environment, at least for me, caring for my elders and caring for my child will be absolutely the last thing I sort of drop spending wise, and also we're seeing 10,000 folks in the US alone turning 65 every day, which means we're having this sort of enormous older generation that will need more and more and more and more expensive care kind of coming online. And what we saw coming out of this year of COVID is people saying, I want to age in place. I want to age with my community. I don't necessarily want to go to an institution. And there's a sort of, that creates a lot of challenges and a ton of opportunities for what our housing looks like, what a smart home looks like, what remote healthcare looks like, how we can improve, and build supply for home healthcare aids and a ton of other stuff in between. So obviously I'm pretty excited about the space. I'll pause there.
I love it. It's so wonderful. And for those who are watching, who are curious about Springbank, make sure you go to springbankcollective.com and sign up to get their email newsletter. I'll say for myself, as someone who started angel investing, and it's a great way to get your feet wet in the ecosystem, in the founder-funder ecosystem. And as Elana said, to bring value to companies and seed companies that you really want to help and that you want to get behind their mission. And the other thing I wanted to make sure that we talked about, because we talked about this in our prep call, is this idea of gender lens investing, and this idea that that doesn't just mean investing in female-led companies. Let's talk about that writ large and how we see that in the grand scheme of equity, because it comes into, child and family stuff has always been seen as women's issues, and that's like a whole paradigm that we need to change. So let's unpack gender lens investing and let's talk about that.
100%. And to be clear, obviously there's so many different ways to look at this, right? So, for really large investment funds that might have like an ESG screen, they might do it as environmental and social goal screens. There might be a negative screen of saying we won't invest in companies so they don't have X% women on their boards. Other people might say our version of gender lens investing is like there has to be at least one woman in the founding team. Others might say it has to be a product or service that is exclusively for women. And in our portfolio, we have a mix, right? So we have some companies, we're invested in a company called Origin that does women's physical therapy, or a company called A Life that does sort of machine learning for all the most challenging decision points in IVF. But then we also have a lot of other companies that are for everybody, but where we believe that if they reach the scale we think they can achieve, will disproportionately benefit and impact the lives of working women and their families. So as an example, we're invested in a company called Wealthy with 2 L's. They actually just announced they closed their Series B. We've been along the ride very gratefully for a while, so it's really awesome. But they basically do care coordination for all the non-clinical layers of care for those caring for a long-term ill. or, aging family member. So like now a lot of Fortune 1000 companies basically offer it as a benefit to their employees. Anyway, it's not only for female employees. I will say the founder is a very wonderful woman. But part is that we know that the vast majority of unpaid family caregiving responsibilities fall to women, as do the vast majority of paid caregiving responsibilities. And so we feel like any tool that really up-levels how the efficiency and the carefulness and the quality of that care really does disproportionately impact women. So that's just one example, but I think, beginning to think more creatively about, what is gender lens, because, we have a lot of work to do, so.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Wealthy. I participated in the Wealthy one too. And I think especially, our friend Eve Rodsky would say that's the invisible labor, right? The mental load of thinking about the logistics. My husband just moved my father-in-law from Baltimore to Florida, right? And it's like just all the things that one has to deal with that historically has not been talked about in the care situation, which also was often called childcare, and to ignore the men that also take care of people in their lives that are older than them. So let's talk about the article that you wrote in Fast Company on paid family leave when the Biden administration was elected. You discussed how paid family leave or inclusivity varies across different, places in the states. So let's talk about what's happened since then, and any changes that have been made since then, and what are things that companies are starting to do that you see that are interesting.
Sure. So it has been it's been an interesting roller coaster ride. There's a lot of women who I think of as real kind of sheroes of mine who have been, talking about care and have been talking about paid family leave for a really long time, with frankly, without it really taking center stage. And I suppose the most minor silver lining of a overall pretty tragic year is, some of these issues around paid family leave. And again, I mean, paid family and medical leave, I should say. I think we people saw very up close and personal in all of their Zooms this year, and obviously also for workers who were not able to work from home. So previously it had been kind of a state and city-based patchwork. I believe at the point at which I wrote that article, there were 9 states that had passed it and the District of Columbia. And, what's happening right now is for the first time in a while, like there's real federal momentum around this. There's a number of very kind of influential senators who are continuing to drive it. And of course, the Biden administration had included it as part of, how they think of the infrastructure package. And sort of as folks may have seen, what they really brought together in that idea of infrastructure was sort of hard and soft infrastructure that I think of all of it as sort of critical underpinning. So obviously bridges and roads enable our economy to work, but we also saw what happens when women and all family members do not have the opportunity to appropriately provide care and find care that they can afford. The economy also comes to a halt. So anyway, so there's quite a big push for that, federally now. I have no crystal balls and, cannot say what's going to happen, but I will say 2 organizations that we are lucky enough to work with quite a bit who are great advocates here. So if you're passionate about kind of staying at the forefront of what is happening on paid family leave, there's one organization called Plus that's the largest nonprofit advocating for paid family leave nationwide. Folks should sign up. They've done some great action opportunities like Zoom lobbying days with your senators, if we're a small business owner in certain key states. And then also Time's Up has a care economy business council that I think both of us are members of, and a number of our sort of friends in the startup community are members of. It's now over 200 companies, and it ranges from, McDonald's and a bunch of, Fortune 100 companies, and also startups working in the space. They are welcoming new members. So if you are a business owner listening in and are interested in kind of both having opportunities to learn as a group from some of the top policymakers out there who are sort of really in the weeds in DC, it's a great place to do that. And then they'll sort of also share some advocacy opportunities as well. I do think, because I know given the Power to Fly community, I'm sure there are a lot of solo entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of all shapes and sizes on this call. And I will say, one of the things that has always been a challenge with paid leave is, increasingly for those of us who work in and around tech, where there's a constant kind of war for talent, we see for folks who are full-time, frankly, mostly knowledge workers, really generous leave policies, and people are competing on leave policies. And we're seeing more and more employers say we want to sort of spend more to do leave and care benefits right. And I think that's amazing. but the challenge is it needs to work for all Americans, not just for those of us working a very small sliver of the tech economy. One thing I think we saw during pandemic, and we'll see to what extent it extends, was, as companies were starting to feel the burn of people dropping out of the workforce, we were starting to see more folks thinking about, better leave benefits, who have a more kind of mixed workforce. I think the picture is still a little cloudy for kind of employers of 50 or less. And this is part of why I'm really hoping that this is where the federal government and states step up to kind of level the competitive playing field so that, small dynamic growing businesses, have the government support to make it easier to offer the same kind of leave to their employees.
Yeah, exactly. As a small business owner myself, I can say that's challenging.
Mm-hmm.
I want to leave time for questions, but there's a couple other things in here that I think I want to hear you talk about, because I think the community will enjoy hearing about it. You have been the innovator in residence for CARE. And I think, in my personal brand alignment work that I do, I say the goal is always to help people get paid to be themselves. And I feel like you very much get paid to be Elana Berkowitz. And so I think for people out there who are like, how can I bridge all these different sectors? And what would it like? I would love to be an entrepreneur in residence or an innovator in residence somewhere. Talk to me about that for a bit, and then we'll hit some questions.
Sure. Well, in that case, I was very lucky. For those of us who were, so I was an early Obama administration person across the Obama-Biden transition in 2008, and then two agencies, the FCC and the State Department. And I will say, the Obama crew, I've been able to have kind of amazing lifelong, experiences with a lot of the folks who I kind of organized with and whatnot in that world. So that's actually how I ended up coming into the CARE sphere. I think something's like, I've always just been kind of mission and impact first, even since I was a little kid, probably to an extent that was like a grieving to my parents at times. So, I think the method and mode of how I deliver that impact has changed, but the kind of North Star on it has not. And so I've gotten to sort of pick up along the way a lot of amazing, other friends and impact. And I will say too, with the CARE work, CARE is one of the world's largest humanitarian organizations. They work all over the world. And, I was very lucky to get to serve in a lot of really interesting places with them. And that was a sort of part-time role. And I think some of it was for me, when I had left government, I think that, we are seeing this move towards sort of how do we do more kind of lean innovation, where are digital first solutions most appropriate, becoming more and more of a conversation, obviously, in more and more social sector organizations. So it's nice kind of feeling like that skills were transferable from things that on paper felt really, really different. And I will say too, I think some of these multi-sector things. So for instance, there was a project I worked on with CARE. I had been sent to a refugee camp in Jordan called Azraq, Syrian refugee camp. And I actually thought we thought we were going to sort of work on on scoping out a tech product they needed to build, sort of do some camp management, kind of a SaaS thing. And as soon as we got there, it was actually clear that was not, the community did not need that thing. And basically the kids council or the youth council in the camp said, what we want is a storytelling camp. We all have phones and we want to know how to make movies on our phones. I can safely say this is not like, I'm not a filmmaker by training at all, but I will say it was this kind of amazing thing, right? Of like, if you've been a multi-sector athlete in your career, all of a sudden we had like Adobe donating all of the editing software, and like friends who I knew from sort of a very different professional moment were flying in, were helping us find local Jordanian editors and producers to come into the camp and teach. And it was this kind of amazing thing of what happens when you've just been at it for a long time, where sort of you kind of have these serendipity moments where people come together to do amazing things. I will also say too, at that point I was, I think, still secretly pregnant. I remember it was, I outed it because on the 7th day of 108-degree heat and shooting and filming, I was like, all right, guys, I can't carry this thing anymore. But anyway, but yeah, and I think too, I think one thing we're seeing right now is when I look at the data of how many people are either currently leaving their jobs or are thinking about where they want to go next in this post-COVID moment, it's really interesting because I field a lot of requests from wonderful people who are trying to figure out, how do I take the skills I've built over either a short career, a medium career, long career, and apply it in a more mission-driven direction. But to me, just based on the volume of those requests I get, it's sort of, to me, it's a real signal for employers that you need to be offering work that offers meaning and value and community to your employees, because it is a very tight talent market, and those folks are looking around and seeking new meaning. So
absolutely. We'll send those folks my way. That's what I do. I hope
love it.
The words to do that. And I agree. There's, we were reading about the Great Resignation. I started doing this work years after the 2016 election, when people were all of a sudden, like overnight, once Trump won, they were like, I don't know, like the stuff I was doing yesterday doesn't matter anymore. Like, how do I continue to show up in the same way when the world has changed beneath me? So the other thing that came to mind is this idea of the rise of the generalist, right? I think that there's something very patriarchal about, like, you are a specialist and you're an expert and you are the expert in this thing. I mean, thought leadership in general has a lot of white patriarchy wrapped up into it. So I wanted you to tell that story because I think it's important for people to see how translatable these skills are and how much that matters right now to actually get things done, because these things are so complicated and interwoven. And what's the phrase? Problems can't be solved with the same tools that we're used to create them. Right?
100%. And I do think too that, like in all of these, right now, obviously starting a new fund, I am, I'm doing work that ranges from CEO to janitor to tap dancer to everything in between. And I think in all of these, all of these jobs and experiences, there's, when you're sort of wandering around a refugee camp looking for a roll of duct tape for a very long time, because that's what people who are far smarter than you and making films need you to do in that moment. And there's these sort of higher order things. But I think, excuse my language, but like, I'm someone who likes to get shit done. I don't need to talk about the stuff I got done. I want to do it. I want to be helpful every day and like go to sleep knowing that I was really helpful. And so I do think that sense of like, what does it look like to be executing every day? And, obviously in like a private sector tech company context, it could be like you're shipping something every week. Obviously in a policy world or, more sort of advocacy oriented world, that looks different. But I think always being clear on what it looks like to be moving the ball forward in a substantive way. Because, not gonna lie, like in the government or in large nonprofit organizations, or even, in super large companies, I think we can all lose a little bit of sight of what it means to actually do the real work instead of the work talking about the work. So anyway.
Totally. So many of my clients who are in corporate or come from corporate, it's diluting the Kool-Aid on what you're actually trying to do and what the goal actually is and what really matters, because it can get very, very muddied. All right. We have two questions here. I feel like I read ones that, especially in developing countries, that investing in women-run businesses led to a much, much larger investment back into the community. That's true about educating girls too, and other things I'll say. Do you feel that also applies to organizations here? My gut says yes. Yes. I mean, women-run businesses, I think Anu Jugal from Female Founders Fund has data about women-led businesses outperforming.
No, I mean, totally. So, I think there's been, studies in a number of contexts, obviously around, for every dollar a woman-owned business get, what are they reinvesting it in, right? That, reinvesting it in their children's education and community run businesses, and, the extent to which it has a real like multiplier effect on each dollar spent, which I think is great and really important. I think, I both do in my gut agree with that about most of the businesses that I see here, but I will also say too, that I think it's really important for us to change the picture of, what kind of women-owned businesses, what kind of women's businesses people are building. And obviously, like in Springbank, we invest in specific sectors. And I have some folks who only invest in women-owned, CPG, consumer packaged goods businesses. But there's, women starting businesses in AI and robotics, in like really deep tech. And so I think we sometimes like get into not every business owned and run by women needs to be like an explosive social enterprise. Do I think that certainly just like building potentially game-changing generational wealth in underrepresented communities and communities of color and women, first-gen immigrants, I do absolutely think that has sort of a profound and transformative effect. I think I grapple a little bit with, investing in women isn't charity. Investing in women is great business. And so I think I also invest in mission-driven businesses, but I do think we sometimes toe this line, which is that I am really excited and passionate about the sort of social impact and power of wildly accelerating the growth of women-owned businesses. But I think we also need to be careful, which is at the end of the day, the dollars that are going to come behind you in most subsequent rounds, those are dollars seeking out the highest return they can in the market. And so I think I sometimes feel that tension in how I hear this issue talked about.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, everything we're talking about is about power and equity and who makes the decisions and who decides what we value and what we care about, which leads to the follow-on is to this is, do you feel like that is undue labor on women, and what are your feelings about it? So this is kind of in the context of when you invest in women, you get outsized returns. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I would say yes.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm just looking at the question again. Yeah, I mean, yes, the sort of undue labor of expectations of, if I invest in you, will you not only grow your business, but also save your entire community at the same time? Like, while also doing 2x as many hours of unpaid labor as men in your household. Yeah, that's a lot to shoulder. That said, I think many women are doing it, but I very much take the point here.
Yeah, I think also, and we're coming up on the hour, but when you have more women on cap tables, and Black and brown people as well, you need more perspectives in those rooms where decisions are made. And it all comes back to power and equity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's leave people with, what are you reading right now? What's a book that you recommend to the community?
Guys, can we all be honest with each other? My ability, I used to do, crank through a book quite frequently. And then during pandemic, I think my ability for long form went out the window a little bit. But I have been actually doing the Annie Duke book and workbook around sort of cognitive biases and how we decide. And I actually, this is embarrassing to report, but my husband and I decided we were going to have a 2-person book club, and he picked the next book, and I don't remember what it is. So I will update everybody later. Sorry.
I love that. I'm going to get Ethan to do that with me. I'm reading Heather McGhee's The Sum of Us right now.
Oh, that book is so good.
Oh my gosh. I find myself staying up way too late because I only really get time to read before bed. And I've been staying up way too late reading, like marking stuff up. But the solid.
If you're not falling asleep, accidentally hugging a book. if I'm not falling asleep accidentally hugging a book, then I'm falling asleep accidentally probably hugging an iPad. So but yeah, and I love your book. Yeah.
No protect in your bedroom. Tech for impact means getting it out of your bedroom.
Very true. Fair point. Take it.
Unless you're meditating. So good to be with you, Elana. We'll have to have a walk in Brooklyn soon, and looking forward to seeing everyone from the Power to Fly community soon. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks to both of you. That was a really great session to get to sit in on, and I really enjoyed the conversation. So thank you.